I remember when this 4th season had finally dropped, I felt nothing. I honestly wasn't that excited for it. It had just been so long since the last one. I'd forgotten half the plot. What I'm saying is I was a bit skeptical going into this after 3 years. Sitting on my sofa being very much like, all right, Duffer Brothers, impress me. And of course, 15 minutes into the first episode, it became my favorite show of all time, yet again. If you haven't seen Stranger Things or this particular season yet, this video should still be a safe space for when it comes to big reveals. I will simply just be here discussing random, out of context food moments and scenes, and then try to recreate them in some way, shape, or form.
Surf's up, Surfer Boy Pizza. This is Argyle speaking. We make everything fresh here at Surfer Boy except for our pineapple, which comes from a can.
I had to start this off with Surfer Boy's Pizza. How could I not? How are we feeling about that pineapple on pizza thing, by the way? To me, it's a topping that I'd always just completely ignored. I remember as a kid, the idea of classic Hawaiian toast really creeped me out. However, the pizza that we see being made this season is not pineapple, cheese, and ham, but from what I can tell, pineapple, cheese, jalapenos.
Good.
It's good? What do you mean it's good?
Really good.
What? That's insane. That's blasphemous. Putting fruit on pizza? No, I didn't try it. No, I obviously didn't try. Stop. Enough.
First things first, get started on the dough, which that needs to be prepared a couple hours in advance. To a large mixing bowl, add some hot water that's close to boiling point, some cold water, and some sugar. Give that a quick mix. And now the water should be at a nice medium temperature, perfect for our yeast. Sprinkle some dry active yeast on top, and let that sit in a warm space for about 10 minutes. In the meantime, inside a separate mixing bowl or a brownie pan, combine the dry ingredients, which that would be flour, vital wheat gluten. That makes the dough just better in a sense, more chewy. If you don't have gluten powder available, no worries, you can just substitute that with more flour. Also add some salt in there as well. Add the dry to the wet ingredients, or vice versa, depending on which bowl is the bigger one, and give everything a good mix with a wooden spoon. Once it's roughly combined, get your hands in there, and then transfer the mix to your surface. Work in a drizzle of olive oil. Here's where you need to feel out the dough a little bit. Mine was slightly too wet, so I ended up adding a bit more flour. Oiling your hands helps a lot as well when working with sticky dough. And by the end, it should look something like this. Transfer this to one of your mixing containers. Cover it up and place it once again someplace warm to rise for 1 to 2 hours. Got a very fluffy pizza dough, which you're gonna need for another minute. Preheat the oven to 230 degrees Celsius and prepare your baking sheet. Instead of lining it with parchment paper, sprinkle it with breadcrumbs or semolina. Cut the dough into 4 equal pieces. If you're not planning on baking 4 pizzas right now, you can just freeze any leftover dough. Create 1 pizza at a time. Using your hands, stretch the dough into pizza shape. You kind of have to transfer it across your knuckles in a way. You could try and throw and catch it into shape as well, or you can also just use a rolling pin. Since I don't have a pizza stone, nor one of those pizza spatula thingies, I'm putting together my pizza on the baking sheet directly. I also noticed that the edges of Argyle's pizza were sort of twisted, so I tried being artsy doing that as well. I took some shortcuts when it came to the topping, however. I added a few spoonfuls of store-bought pizza sauce, added some store-bought vegan cheese, then some mushrooms, some jalapenos, pineapple chunks, and some more vegan cheese. I baked this for around 15 minutes. serve pretty much immediately. I had my doubts about the fruit, but I honestly think the pineapple worked really, really nicely in this. So I'm a converted pineapple on pizza person. Try before you deny.
Al, aren't you gonna finish your... what? What's going on, you guys?
Okay, I sense tension. Is it the risotto? Everyone hates the risotto.
Absolutely not. No, it's incredible.
This risotto is smacking, dude.
Sadly, we don't ever really find out what Murray put in his risotto exactly, but I bet it's a good guess to think he went for classic mushroom. To a small saucepan or a bowl, add a handful of dried mushrooms, a vegetable broth cube, and some hot boiling water. Set that aside to soak for about 5 minutes. In the meantime, finely chop up some onions or shallots, some cremini mushrooms or any other type of mushrooms you want to use, and also some garlic. After removing the soaked mushrooms from the broth, you're gonna chop those up as well. Bring a medium to large saucepan to medium heat and add in some olive oil.
Can you pass me the olive oil? That's wine.
Once that's hot, add the onion plus garlic and give that a good 5 minutes of sizzling. Then mix in the 2 types of mushrooms. Allow those to cook alongside the onion and garlic for another 5-6 minutes. Now mix in some risotto rice, followed by some white wine. Allow the wine to simmer for 2 to 3 minutes. Once most of the wine has evaporated, bring the heat back down to medium. Now start adding the warm broth from earlier, ladle by ladle. So you add a bit of warm broth, mix and allow it to cook until it's pretty much absorbed, and then continue with adding more broth until the rice is at your preferred consistency. This whole process took about 25 minutes for me. Once the risotto has the texture that you want, add in some white wine vinegar or lemon juice to taste, some vegan Parmesan cheese, also a bit of vegan butter, and perhaps also some chives or parsley or basil, plus of course some salt, so taste test and season to your liking with that. This risotto is indeed incredible, smacking, absolutely obsessed with this. Obviously this needs to be served just like in the show, next to some sad looking side salad, a piece of bread, and a can of Coke. Coca-Cola is one of the few big brands sponsoring not this video, but Stranger Things as a whole. Lacoste is another good example, and so is Jif peanut butter, which had its number of moments to shine this season.
I am making PB&Js.
Right, yeah, no, duh, of course. I am also making PB&Js, as it so happens.
Cool.
So for this next recipe, I thought of recreating Vicky's peanut butter on peanut butter monstrosity. Since this otherwise would just be a 10-second clip of me spreading peanut butter on bread, I thought this would be a good excuse to try and make my own really soft, really white American sandwich bread that isn't dry and tastes a million times better than your average store-bought toastbrot. In a large mixing bowl, combine some hot boiling water, some cold water, and a bit of vegan butter, also some sugar. Give that a good mix. It's okay if the butter doesn't melt fully here. Then sprinkle over a packet of dry active yeast and set the bowl aside to rest in a warm protected spot for 10 minutes. Meanwhile, mix together the dry ingredients in a separate bowl. Yet again, that would be flour, salt, and some additional gluten mix, which, once again, if you don't have that, you can just use regular flour. Combine wet and dry with your spatula. And then transfer this to your surface. Knead for a good 6 minutes. You might have to add some extra flour here. Buttering your hands helps a ton as well, so same process as with the pizza makings. Place the dough back into one of the bowls you just used and give that 1 to 2 hours of rising time covered in a warm protected spot. In the meantime, line a 25 to 30 centimeter loaf pan with wet parchment paper. Can you tell that it's been very warm and humid these days in Berlin? Transfer the dough into the prepared pan. Give it another 30 more minutes of rising. No worries, I managed to squeeze any overhanging dough back into the pan. My loaf pan is on the shorter side. I think it's like 23 centimeters, I don't know. So if you're using a slightly bigger one, you should be good. Before baking, feel free to brush the unbaked bread with a bit of vegan cream or non-dairy milk, and then place this into the cold oven. Turn the heat to 180 degrees Celsius, and then as soon as the oven reaches the right temperature, you allow it to bake for 30 to 35 minutes. I needed to run, which is why I cut into it pretty much straight away. You can see it's still steaming, and so the slices here came out extremely soft. But the longer that you let it sit on the counter, the more it's going to firm up. Here's the bread after a few hours of resting. It's a really good bread. It's a lot more salty than your average sandwich bread. Feel free to cut back on the salt and only do 1 teaspoon instead of 1.5 or 1 1/4. Anyway, let's actually make Vicky's sandwich. Okay, let's get Jesus. Unfortunately, I couldn't find real Jif peanut butter. It's kind of a shame. As expected, this was a little hard to chew, but I love peanut butter more than anything, so I was okay with that. Ever so often in these fictional food videos, instead of trying to accurately replicate something I see on screen, I like to put together recipes that are a bit more on the random side of things. Sometimes a character inspires me, or a place. In this case, it was Vecna, or more so, Vecna's part of the Upside Down. For some reason, I was envisioning this cake that when you cut into it, it gives you that kind of red and black aesthetic. This is not a cake celebrating Vecna as a person or being, he's the worst. It's just an appreciation for the aesthetic. This cake is made up of 4 parts. An outer chocolate layer, that's our ground, and then when you cut into it, you've got these black sort of veins that run through this dark red cream. I also put raspberries in there. They kind of happen to look like one of the many upside down creatures. The overall concept of the cake is heavily inspired by this viral recipe here. I thought this would be so fitting, and so I basically veganized that and gave everything more of a devilish look. Alright, let's get into this. The making of this cake starts the night or day before. The red cream is based on cashews, which is why we need to boil some of those for 25 to 30 minutes. In the meantime, grab your 20 centimeter springform baking tin. I cannot seem to find the bottom of my springform pan. Does anybody know where it is? I'm addressing friends and family here. If you have it, let me know. Lay out your pan with cling foil. It's also good to have some excess foil hanging over the sides. The black hive mind type vines are made up of black colored crepe, and for that you're simply just gonna combine all crepe ingredients in either a big high-speed blender or a large bowl. The blender is more convenient, but the bowl works too. Sifting my dry ingredients here was a fancy step that is not really necessary. Once you've got your chocolate crepe batter, mix in lots of black food coloring. At first it's gonna look like the black does nothing, it's just this muddy gray, but as soon as you cook the pancakes, they should turn as black as they possibly could. Bring a non-stick crepe pan with a bit of coconut oil to medium high, and then once it's hot, add about 1/4 to 1/3 of a cup of batter, tilting the pan and swirling it around in a circle. Cook it for 1 to 2 minutes. And then go in with a spatula to loosen up the edges, and then you can flip it. Cook the other side for 30 seconds to a minute. Also, 1 to 2 pancakes you can mess up on for this cake. That's totally fine. Okay, now set the cup aside. Maybe perhaps have a little iced coffee break and then grab the blender or the food processor to make the filling. Once again, just add all the ingredients and hit blend. Use a tamper to push down onto the ingredients as it's blending. All you need is the boiled and now drained cashews, some vegan cream cheese, some soft, pretty much melted vegan butter, some vanilla, some stabilizer that works without boiling. I'm using locust bean gum, but that can also be skipped. Also add some lemon juice, powdered sugar, and a bit of non-dairy milk, just to help it all blend. Last but not least, of course, add some red food coloring. Still, this was way too pink and way too friendly looking, so I ended up adding some more of the black. Now it's time to assemble the cake. Grab your in foil wrapped baking tin and add 1 to 2 of the crepe to cover not only the bottom, but also going up the sides as well. Most of my pancakes didn't turn out super large, which is why I used 2. It's okay if the sides are flopping over right now. Then cover your pancake crust with about 3 tablespoons of the cream cheese mix, spreading that all over. What gives this cake structure is little crepe bags filled with the cream and fruit. It's best to put those together inside little bowls or glasses. You need, I want to say 6 to 8 of these little pocket thingies. Transfer those to your cake base. Make sure they're nice and tightly packed. And then we're almost there. Add the remaining fruit on top. With my hands, I kind of push down onto everything a little bit, and then I top that off with the remaining cashew cream, creating an even layer. Add your last 1 to 2 pancakes on top to finish this off, tucking them into the sides as well. Then I place the overlapping pieces of foil over top and put the cake into the fridge overnight. The following day, melt some chocolate, whichever chocolate melting method you prefer. Mix in some coconut oil as well. Now unpack your cake. Chocolate goes on top. Make sure you get all sides, and then pop this back into the fridge for another 1 to 2 hours to set fully. And then you can cut into it. Look at her, she's a beauty, I know. It's exactly what I wanted. The by far most iconic Stranger Things food is, of course, Eggos. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I've made Eggos on here before, and that recipe is pretty good. It's just that I never had the right waffle iron for it. Until now, this is the cutest thing I own and will ever own. I only made a few tiny tweaks to my old waffle recipe here, but nothing too big of a change. First off, combining all the wet ingredients, allowing those to rest and curdle up a bit. Then you mix together all the dry ingredients in a separate bowl. And then you combine all of that, allow that to rest for a few moments while you grease and preheat your insanely adorable waffle iron. For that first waffle, I did a bit too much batter, but it turned out okay. Yeah, and then just serve it up. Mike added butter syrup. I just did plain maple here. And that concludes this video. Side note, in case you haven't heard already, I wrote a real cookbook with publisher and everything, and it's now out for pre-orders. And actually, on so many sites, there's a discount right now for anybody who chooses to pre-order. And because so many people asked, it is available worldwide. And even if, for example, your Amazon doesn't have it, you can get it through Book Depository, which does worldwide free shipping. All the links and information will be down below. Thanks so much. Until next time, bye!